Welcome to our Urban Legends podcast. I'm Dr. Gloria McDaniel Hall. I've been a teacher, a principal, and assistant superintendent, all within urban schools in Chicago and around the country. Our Urban Legends podcast is a forum for sharing ideas, strategizing together, and supporting each other as we dismantle the deficit narratives sometimes associated with urban education and discuss where and how amazing work is being done. So I am excited today because I have my colleague, Molly Buren from National Louis University, and I also have my student, Michelle, from National Louis University in my graduate class this term. And neither one of them knew each other, but I needed the voice of a professor and the voice of a student in order to bring Standard A to life. What Standard A says for people who don't live in Illinois or have access to the culturally responsive teaching and leading standards that we're going to go over in our session is that we really take a proactive stance in terms of understanding the lived experiences of our students and ensuring that we build self-awareness of our own selves and how we show up, and that we work diligently to build relationships with our students. The thing is, we typically are teaching. The reason why we started this work at National Louis is because we were teaching teachers and leaders who were going to go into schools in Illinois, said, here's what those people need to know. But if we're teaching those people how to implement and really embrace these standards, then we need to understand them ourselves because we're their instructors. And so often, what we do is we get something from the state or we get something from federal or wherever we get it from, and we just transactionally say, yep, okay, I'm self-aware. I know about my relationships to others. Like there's so many missteps that we take a lot of times instead of digging deep into the work. So I'm excited that both of them will be talking with us today and giving us some real street data on what it feels like to do this in real life. So I'm going to start with Michelle. So Michelle, are you aware of how your instructors' identities might impact the way you're being taught? And what impact does your own identity have on your perspectives about the way you'd like to experience learning at the university?
Okay. So I am very aware of, or I'm aware of my own identity. And so when I'm dealing with a professor, it's great if they're also aware with their identity. I have had professors where you can kind of tell in the space that there was a lack thereof. And so that tends to have an effect on, like, in my opinion, the connection that's occurring in the classes. I am an educator myself. And so with me being as aware as I am with my identity, it's definitely helped in my experience in my career. Of course, I identify as a Black woman. And so being aware of some of those racial and gender dynamics has helped me see and or create spaces for my scholars so that they feel safe, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel validated. Because if you go into this identity blind space, I have a problem with that. And I kind of spoke to that when I kind of addressed the professor that is not aware of their identity. When you're just teaching facts, that's okay. If you're in like a data class or a math class, or not even, because I still feel that you need to have that human connection. And so if you're identity blind, that means you're not necessarily seeing who it is you're talking to. You're not seeing the good, the bad, and whatever it is that they need at the moment. Just being aware of myself, the community, and what's in front of me helps me be a better instructor.
I love it. Okay, so Molly, what impact does your own identity, and that would be race, ethnicity, national origin, sex, language, all of that, like what impact does that have on your perspectives and beliefs about teaching and about the students you serve?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think my identity impacts every single thing that I do throughout my day, from the moment I wake up till the moment I go to sleep. Starting first and foremost with the fact that I'm white and I come from a unearned privileged group whose norms dominate everything that we do in our society. And I push back against that. And so it impacts everything that I do. But when it comes to my teaching, I mean, I center identity work in every class that I teach because I think it's really important, especially, I mean, all the time, but especially because I typically don't look like the students that I work with. And I want to make sure that I recognize how I have power, who holds power, and we talk about it, right? A lot. And by doing that, I'm constantly trying to center my students, not myself, and their lived experiences. So I think about my race all the time. I purposefully do, and I really want to make students understand that I'm aware of who I am, not force it down their throats, but open spaces for us to talk about it and really co-create how we learn together, and then just step aside, right? And not centering myself. So I think by doing that, it opens up opportunities for discussions about all of our intersecting identities, how those impact, who holds power, the ways we all hold power in certain ways and not in other ways, or how some of us feel that identities leave us open to oppression in many, many different ways and multiple forms and layers of oppression. So really thinking about how I come into the conversation from my position, especially since the conversation is one that has a lot to do with the harm done by the background that I come from.
Yep.
So I'm just really aware of all those things. Did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
So much. Thank you so much. You made me just want to come join your classes. I do. And I think that's another thing at the university, even though that's not one of the questions I have prepared. We have individual people doing individual things. We have students having experiences, and we don't take the time to really understand those deeply or share. Like, we should be sharing with each other. Like, you come to my class, give me some ideas. I come to your class. Maybe we can come up with some ideas. Students visiting, like us having conversations like this. We don't really do that enough. It's kind of a siloed situation. But okay. Next question is, Michelle, do you think it's important that your instructors are aware of their biases? And you know what? That's a crazy question. I would say, why is it important that instructors are aware of their biases? Because everybody has some.
Yes. I think it's important for instructors to know what their biases are so that they can do a self-check. Awareness is actually the first step, right? And so if you're able to identify the spaces and places in which that you can grow, it will be great to start there, right? And also just knowing what your biases are so that you can kind of, like I said, do that self-check when an issue or an occurrence arises. And also so that you can create these safe and brave spaces. Just like the professor said, that sometimes she has to step back so that she's not censoring herself because, institutionally, we always censor whiteness. And so just decentering that and dismantling a lot of, or knowing to be able to dismantle some of the institutional harm is really important. And also just even the simplicity of selecting materials, the type in which that the style in which you're teaching, what it is that you're allowing the students to bring in. Are you calling in different identities? And so you have to be aware of who you are and what you're not able to do. So maybe that you could sorry.
That's okay.
So that maybe that you could either lend on your students or push in areas where you can. And so it's that finding that balance. And so you definitely do need to be aware of yourself, your preconceived biases, and your audience.
Yeah. So Molly, I'm going to change it up a little bit. So as Michelle was talking, I was thinking something that we wrote in the article that we published has to do with the fact that teachers, like people get into education because they have big hearts for the most part. They want to do right by kids. People love kids. I would say 90% of the teachers that I know got into the profession because they love children and because they love teaching. And so that's why I feel like it's really hard to hear that I might have a bias. No, I'm a nice person. I'm a nice person. Like, I don't feel some sort of way. I don't have any people don't want to believe that they do. I don't want to say why is that a hard conversation, because I already know why it's a hard conversation. How do we get around that part where people just want to be nice? They, you know, they want to feel like they're nice people because they are. But the biases come up because of experiences we've had, the media, things we've seen, things we've read, people we have not interacted with.
And
then
I'm sorry, we've all been conditioned. I mean, this is America.
Yes.
we have all been conditioned for generations now. And so there's no way in which that we can truly be as genuine as we think we can, just because of, I mean, cartoons, books. There's so many different messages and ideas and preconceptions that, you know, it's really hard.
It is really hard. I don't know, Molly, what do you think? Like, what is it about the work or the journey that you've had in education that created the Molly that I know? The reason why I asked you to do this, because you are reflective. No, you are reflective all the time. And it's not to say that, okay, you've completely eliminated all your biases, but how do we help people see or really understand that notion that we have them? Wherever they came from, we have them, and we cannot be our best selves, our most impactful selves in any classroom if we haven't started to examine them, and the work is never done.
So I think first of all, it's because, you know, from years and years of reflecting and learning that it's okay to be vulnerable in spaces where your vulnerability can help others, it's a way to call them in, you know, but authentically. So starting, I mean, I'm just going to get real practical for a minute. I just have always started from a place where I'm being vulnerable with the students first, talking about my own identity, modeling for them. I mean, telling them things that I normally wouldn't tell students. This is, of course, after we've established a community agreement and I've had some other conversations, and really gotten to a place where we have a brave space. And then I take the first leap. And I think that helps. So starting from a place of vulnerability, opening up a space where students feel that sense of belonging and that sense of courage. And then starting with the identity work really with themselves, but then just looking at how, really talking in a benign way first, right? How do your biases impact how you look at wedding rituals, or how do you look at what students should do, like, because I work in disability, right? What students should do for post-secondary options. Like, you know, I'm from here where we're, you know, independence is something that everybody really honors. And so we think that students should have to go out into the world and be independent, that they, like, that's the success. But in some cultures, that's not that's not the next step. The anticipated next step might be something else. So really looking at from like a benign place and then building from there. And really just constantly like starting with me and then stepping aside and giving opportunities for them to sort of build up their courage and have these conversations in small groups, not always in large groups, you know, really trying to just build them up, right? And trying to provide opportunities and spaces where the students feel like who they are isn't a bad thing. Loving students and wanting to help them is wonderful, but that your intentions don't always have the impact that you're anticipating, and really talking about that as well, how vested intentions can also be harmful. How, why, looking at different case studies, talking about it, you know, listening to different voices, also talk about the danger of a single story, for example, and really digging into what it means to be who you are and how that impacts everything that you do in the world, but especially teaching and learning. Why I'm able to do that, I don't know. I just grew up in a house where we reflect constantly. Both of my parents are like that. And I learned at an early age that reflecting means you're always learning and growing, and learning and growing is a good thing, right? And then I went into a profession where I work with other people and try to help them learn and grow. And I think the last thing is I just always talk about how we're on this learning journey together, and that I learn from you, you learn from me. Again, positioning myself, not at the center, but on the side, opening up spaces where I'm vulnerable. I think all of those things help have this really difficult conversation. And then it's not one conversation, right? It's threaded throughout once we sort of come to that courageous space in the class. So not first class, right? But second or third.
Love it. Okay, so Michelle, do you like or appreciate having opportunities to share information about your community, culture, and history while you're in class?
Yes, I actually. So I teach in the community that I grew up in. So I often let my students know that. I let them know what it was like when I was going to school. I let them know the changes that I've seen. I charge them to challenges that I wish that they would do, just so that they can have a little bit background knowledge on the school and know that it doesn't just serve them. It has served others. It has served before you. It will continue to serve after you. I am a special ed teacher, and so I often try to, just highlight the educational experience and even the educational challenges. I'm very authentic and genuine and honest with my students so that they are able to know, and I think that is part of like me knowing who I am and the struggles that come with being a Black woman. But I try to just preface and let them know the struggles of education and what that looks like and what it looked like for many African American people, just so that they can understand the journey. These institutions were not created for us. And so the fact that they may not feel safe or feel wanted in these spaces, that's valid. That's a valid feeling. And I want them to feel valid in that feeling and not less than or anything else. And so that's another reason why I'm in education, is because I did not see many like me. So I'm trying to do the adverse effect. And so me telling my story, telling my journey, it doesn't just benefit my students, it benefits me because it's part of my healing. And it also benefits my colleagues too, because not everyone has that same lived experience. And same with my students. They may not have the same experience I'm telling them that I've had, but it's good to know different perspectives. It's great to know different stories. And I think that just adding that layer in my classroom lets the scholars and the students see me as a person.
Love it. Love it. Okay, Molly. How do you, I know we talked a little bit about it before, but your students' lived experiences, sometimes I know as a professor, when we find out what those are, there are times when I've been, I guess, maybe too lenient because of something that was going on with the student, because you want to still keep the standard high, right? So how do you keep the standard high, but validate experiences? And how do you do that part?
That's a question. Right. Yes. Well, I think it starts with making time for one-on-one meetings together, and really encouraging and sometimes even requiring one at the very beginning or, a couple classes in, so that you can form that. I mean, especially if it's teacher candidates, right? So I teach doc students who are already kind of in the field, and then those getting ready. With the ones who are getting ready or who are new to the field, I really like to meet with them as, at least once or twice at the beginning first, to get a sense of how they're feeling about the profession, how they're feeling about themselves, what's going on outside of their life. With the doc class, I do that, but I do it usually more with writing and finding out sort of what's your journey so far, what drives you, what's your passion. So I get that background knowledge. Now, and then as you get to know them and you open up, like I said earlier, those spaces for sharing and being vulnerable, that's when I think what you're talking about, you start to learn even more and deeper about what's actually going on outside of our class in their lives.
Yes.
So holding them up to higher expectations is really hard, right? Because you have, again, that heart that's giant and pumping, and you want to help them and you want to make sure they get the best experience. But, I think coming up with ideas with them about how I can support them.
Yes.
So if they haven't shown up for class, or if they're not doing a few assignments, I reach out, we meet, we talk, I hear what's happening. And then I try, and I don't always do that. Sometimes I can't fit it in, but I try to, right? We try to come up with ways that I can support them, and I've tried to really hear about, why is this going on for you? Or, okay, let's say you use AI on the final project and we need to talk about that.
Yes.
What's going on? Why are you using AI? What's going on in your life and why? I really tried to get to the root of the problem. You mentioned street data. So I was just thinking about this idea of like, we want to get to the root cause of the problem and then go from there. And then, you know, if it turns out that they just don't have enough time, or there's just, you know, a lot of really tough stuff going on in their lives, I just try to work with them to figure out a path forward for them that maybe usually isn't the same as the other students, but that gets them to the end while holding them up to expectations. It's really hard. I'm not saying I do it successfully every time, but I think that making that personal connection from the beginning and then checking in and learning about what's going on is really the best that I can do. I kind of want to know what you do, but I know you're me. But I mean, you know, it's hard. It
is hard. It is hard. And I do take a cue from, okay, the assignment is a little bit late. I try to send out something at the beginning, like a questionnaire that, you know, tell me about the ways that I can best support you. Tell me about your family. Tell me about, and people, like, I'm surprised because I would think students might just give me like 1 or 2 word answers. No, there's paragraphs. I think they want to share with the person who's going to be their instructor. And so I really read that information and then get in touch with them to say, okay, you said your dad was ill.
Right.
How's that going? Do you need help with anything? So using the things that people tell me, and through the office hours, like people sometimes just show up, and they show up because they know they'll be the only one at the office hours, and we could just like kind of talk about stuff, talk through assignments, use the rubrics, use grading for equity so that I'm not being so, and all the things. But okay.
Can I add something? I have just have something. You made me think of something that I wanted to share, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
The surveys, like doing them beginning, middle, and end, and checking in. I do this thing every class called Wishes and Pluses, Reading 5, to get a sense of what's working and what's not working. So here's like, I use student feedback to check myself, but also to create and co-create and sort of tailor the rest of their experience to meet what they need, right? Their needs. And I found that so successful. And then at the end, doing it again and finding out what worked, what didn't work, and using that to inform what I do when I teach the class the next time.
Yeah.
But you're right about that question. Like, tell me about your family. Tell me something that nobody knows about you. It is incredible what you can learn through those surveys and really getting to know them before they even start. So thanks for reminding me.
Yeah.
I'll stop now. I know you have another question.
Okay, so final question, you two. It's the more global question about how in education we have No Child Left Behind. We have all the things, and we have different ways that we're evaluating teachers. We have all the paperwork to go with everything, but then we don't get to the nitty gritty. And I think that's what Standard A does. It gets us to, what is my awareness of myself and how I show up for others? Like really the emotional intelligence question. Michelle, if you were to provide guidance for students so that they would know, use their power as students to speak up when they have needs and express those with their instructors, and then Molly, what do you think we need to do differently at the university level so that we're not always just transactional in the way that we attempt to be compliant? Either one of you can go first. Like, I'm saying, it feels like we're constantly compliant everywhere. And compliance is not the work that I need to do on me. How can we be different with that? I'm sorry, Michelle.
Oh, no, I was just asking if you could reiterate the question, but I'm thinking my answer is I'm really big on building relationships and creating a community. And so with doing that, I've realized that it kind of creates this safe and brave space for scholars so that they can step up and step back when they feel the need. I have had the opportunity to I took some PD and we did this workshop it's called a democratic classroom. And so it's a educational tool to kind of use where you're centering students and giving them more of the power and taking some of the instructor's power away. And so it's a lot more like student-led, student-driven. And so I've done this for the past 2 years, and I've seen so much like more student voice and agency, where it would seem like it's just a like very relaxed environment. However, the accountability everyone has with each other, it bumps the rigor up. Like they're making sure that, why didn't you do this? We're supposed to be doing this right now. Where is this? And so it takes it away from, oh, the Miss Lau show, the Miss Lau story. and when they actually see that they've, whether it be a class meeting or a survey, whatever they said is actually manifested into the classroom space, that kind of validates their voice. And so just being able to have those open relationships, that open line of communication, making school humane, I think has worked for me, especially, like I said, just being aware of who you are. That institutional trauma, it does not allow certain students to be who they are. And so just creating that space and allowing the students, and oftentimes I call them scholars because they're scholars, right? So offering the scholars an opportunity to have a say in their education in turn means so much to them, which guides me to provide them the resources that they need.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Molly, take us home.
Well, you ask a very difficult question, but I'm sitting here thinking about listening to Michelle about this idea of using students and scholar voice to drive change. I feel like a lot of the work on CRTL standards was done, checked off. Now we're doing it, but we don't know what's going on. And you're right about the silos, right? So I'm just thinking about this idea of bringing student voice to, for example, our faculty meetings and having them see and hear interviews about best practices, about how they feel validated, about a sense of belonging, really sharing and taking some data about survey data, but more like I'm thinking interviews where they can see what's working and then have us try it, all of us, and check back in again and then try it some more. Bring in students if they feel comfortable, but I mean, however we do it, using their experiences and really centering and just blasting them, like, so that faculty hear that, not just in their own experience, but across, right? So if I could hear about what's working for a student in your class, and I'm thinking, oh, that would be great for me, or, oh, mine, they do that too, or, oh, I never thought about that, or, students or faculty who've never heard a student speak about practice, they don't maybe open up those opportunities. So, hearing a student being reflective about their professor's practice and what's working could be a novel experience for them, but it might be a way to kind of kickstart the CRTL standards again and kind of kickstart that movement towards all of us not doing the same thing, but gathering like a repertoire, whatever that word is, when you put a bunch of things together, like a repository. That's it. A repository of student experiences that lead to best practices that are all sort of fueled by the students, right? And that, I think, could help really kickstart the reflective practice and the action.
Thank you too so much. You took time, Michelle, you are in the classroom. I'm so sorry. And you took time out of your day. Thank you so, so much for doing this. Molly, you are amazing. Thank you so much for not only being my friend, my colleague, the person who I share stuff with at work, and who really is doing the work. I just really thank you too for being open to this conversation today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, me too. Nice to meet you, Michelle. Thank you.
Nice to meet you too. This is awesome.